Hi everyone and welcome back. If you haven't seen the first lecture yet on the elements of drama, please go back and watch that because I talked a lot about the differences between drama and fiction, and now we're kind of going to get into just what makes up a play, and we're going to talk about just the elements of drama. The other one, we talked about some of these things already, the actors, the acts, the scenes, and now we're going to get into some of the literary elements as well. There we go, part 2. So the first literary element is speech. In short fiction, we do have dialogue. In a drama, the dialogue becomes even more important because we don't have descriptions and we don't have a point of view. When you're reading a novel or a short story, you have a point of view, you have some type of a narrator, right? For the most part in drama, you don't. Once in a while, you'll have a play or a TV show or a movie maybe that has some elements there where somebody is narrating the play or you have like some voiceover. But for the most part, not. So it really is more up to the audience to interpret the play and also the director, whoever's putting on the play. And again, things I talked about before, like casting choices and costuming and all of that, which I think costuming we'll talk about more. Dialogue is with 2 or more characters. So dia means 2 in the Greek. Log here means to talk. And then we also have the term monologue. Mono means one. And then again, that root word log means to talk. So a monologue is a long speech delivered by one single character that's delivered alone or in front of people. In the play Doubt, which you guys will be reading for the drama or the tragedy section of drama, the first act is really one scene, and the entire scene is a monologue given by Father Flynn. He's giving a sermon to the crowd. It's a long speech and it's in front of other people. The other term I'd like you to know, soliloquy, solo also means one, and loque with a Q comes from the same word as this with a G, just kind of changes here. So a soliloquy, a little bit different. Soliloquy, solo is the same word, right? Solo meaning alone. So mono means one, dio means 2, solo means one, but really means alone. And a soliloquy is a speech by an actor who is completely alone on stage. So you are getting their private thoughts. I don't know if we are reading a play where this occurs. We might have a little bit in Pygmalion. There's possibly a point where Eliza might talk to herself. Some plays, what's interesting is, all the other characters will leave except for one, and they kind of give their inner thoughts. Or the characters will be on stage, they'll kind of freeze, the spotlight will go on the one character, and they'll give their inner thoughts. This really is done because in drama, you can't have a first-person narrator. And so because sometimes the playwright still wants you to know the person's inner thoughts, but they also want you to know that the character's not speaking those inner thoughts to anybody else, right? In a short story, we'd have a first-person narrator and they'd tell you exactly what they think all the time. So it's an interesting convention to kind of make up for the deficit of not having a narrator. Here's someone giving a soliloquy, again, all alone on stage. Oh, I just said that. It can be similar to first-person narration. It can just be the character thinking or talking out loud to themselves. Technical elements, mise-en-scène. Mise-en-scène means setting the scene. And this is something we do not get in any other form but drama. And then again, when drama is performed on TV or on the stage. It's a French term from the early days of theater. The word early is missing there. And setting the scene basically includes the location, the set design and decor, costumes, props, blocking, lighting. And we're going to talk about a couple of these. Here it is. I have to tell you guys, I do not know what play this is from. I wish I did, because the blocking means where the people are in relation to each other and then how they move around the stage. So if you have this young man right here, if he steps forward onto the stage or if he steps side to side. I think there's another slide talking about this in a minute. But look at how the characters are standing and look at the very sparse set design. We just have a rug and some concrete blocks for them to sit on. This person in the middle looks almost like a child. He's obviously upset, right? I believe this is supposed to be a family, and the mother could not care but at all, right? What's interesting to me is he's in jeans like his brother. The brother is in a white shirt like the father. He's also the young man in the middle in stripes like the mother. So we have and she's in kind of like this tannish color, a little bit darker than the father's clothes. Also, he has no shoes on. So it's kind of possibly indicating that he's a little bit younger. I'm not sure. But you have a family dynamic where they all have a color palette, right, that they're sticking to. Same thing with on the stage, this tan and brown, a little bit of blue here in the carpet. But that's sort of interesting to me. And the mise-en-scène, especially when you get into cinematography and film, the mise-en-scène is really important because the audience has these different snapshots like this, making sure that all the elements kind of relate to each other. This mise-en-scène is quite different, and I have this because it's quite more elaborate than the one up top, right? This is from an opera, and we have the Madame here, the Duchess, and then her servants who are all doting on her and singing about her, and quite elaborate scenery. The costumes are also quite elaborate, and the two images here, you can tell that it's interesting. She's the center of attention in a way because of how the mise-en-scène is set with everyone kind of around her. And yet, none of them are looking at her except possibly this girl over here. But for the most part, they're talking or singing or gossiping together. So this is, the great variety of theater. You can have a play that's crazy elaborate like this. Pygmalion, usually when it's performed, can have some quite elaborate sets. Not quite so much as this opera, but the costumes are important in that play. In the play that you're going to watch, the OneAct play called Sure Thing, the costumes really don't matter and the set is quite sparse. It's just a coffee table and maybe a coffee shop behind them. So it's interesting how much difference we can have even within the same type of literature. Technical elements. So talking about the set. If you've ever heard the term breaking the fourth wall, it's because the set is set up like this: 1 wall, 2 wall, 3 wall, and then the fourth wall here is the audience. Breaking the fourth wall means that a character talks directly to the members of the audience. You'll have to forgive me, I'm writing with a mouse today and it's a little bit complicated. Here you can kind of see another interesting set design. Not quite so sparse as the first thing I showed you, but not quite so elaborate as the second. There's clearly set up for Christmas. We've got some pictures on the walls. This is someone's home, and yet there's no backdrop, meaning there's no outside that we can see, just the walls of their home sort of demonstrated by that fabric. So the set is this. It's the construction on the stage that shows the time and the place sometimes just the place. It can sometimes be called scenery. Some plays have one set and other plays have multiple sets that have to be changed and rotated. So this is from a play called Auntie Mame, and when they're not in this apartment, they sweep off or take out all of this furniture they've got set up, right? Gets quickly taken off the stage. This curtain here gets pulled up, and behind this are some sets and some pieces of scenery that indicate that they're outside. So it can be quickly changed on the same set. Most sets, again, have 3 walls. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. Another technical element is in a play are stage directions. In your book, I tried to make sure that all of these were correct. We have an OER text, so as I've said before, there may be some errors there, but the stage directions can be found in brackets or italics. Stage directions come in between pieces of dialogue. They describe scenery, lighting, blocking, directions for characters. Not all the time. Sometimes you'll have a play that talks about, sometimes you'll have a play with a lot of stage directions because the author wanted some kind of control over what the characters do, and very specifically, especially if there's a prop that's used in the play, right? So they'll say in the play Doubt, when you read that, there's one point where Father Flynn sits in the chair of a nun and she likes to be in charge. So it says very specifically that he sits in her chair to kind of show that they're having this power struggle, right? In the play Pygmalion, there are sometimes long pieces of stage directions based on what he wanted the people to be doing and interacting. Other times, not so much. Other times it'll just say, John walks over and picks up a cup of coffee. And that's kind of it. These are some of the things you might see in the stage directions. Center stage, stage left, stage right, upstage or rear, and then downstage or front. It's weird sometimes if you haven't done theater, because upstage is the back of the stage, downstage is toward the audience. And then we use the words incorrectly. Oh, they're trying to upstage you. Well, if they were trying to upstage you, they'd be standing in the back. It doesn't make any sense. One of the things, I cannot stress this enough, and if you were in my real class, in person rather, not that this isn't a real class, because it is, but if you were in my in-person class, I would stress this over and over and over. Here I only get to say it once. Make sure that you read the stage directions. The biggest mistake I see people make when they first start reading drama is they see things that are in brackets or in italics. They think that they're not important, and so they skip over them. Please make sure that you read them, because they really give you clues, not just to where people are moving around, but, intricate things like, in Pygmalion, we learn Professor Higgins goes to his mother's house. You don't know who any of these people are, but it does matter. A man goes to his mother's house. There is about a paragraph of stage directions describing what her house looks like and how he kind of enters it. And this is really important because they're trying to show you her social class. They're trying to show you how this man and his mother interact, how they sometimes butt heads, how they other times get along. The stage directions are what tell you that, and they also help put in your mind what this play would look like. So make sure that you read them, please. Thank you. Blocking, I kind of talked about, refers to specifically where the actors stand and how they move about on the set. As I said, it can be extremely meaningful to the narration, how the characters are positioned. Showing dominance, showing the importance of family or religion or something like that, other many relationship possibilities. So yes, watch for those things. Here's some examples of blocking from a movie. Here you can see, this is from When Harry Met Sally. This is two friends who get together and maybe they fall in love, but they begin they have a sexual relationship after a long friendship. So she's standing upright, he's leaning in. At this point, he's kind of more interested in her, right? They're maintaining eye contact, and then here, he's hunching down, she gets down at his level. They're, again, making direct eye contact, kind of possibly interested in each other. And at this point, they are having a fight. And again, you can tell just from the blocking. He is looking this way with laser beam eyes. She is looking this direction, off into the... It looks like she's looking in two different directions, but she's not. Now it looks like she's crying blood, so I will erase the slide. But you can, my point is that these are things to look for because they can tell a lot about the relationships of the two characters just on where they're standing and how they're standing. Stage directions, just for an example of those, here's a bracketed, this is from Dead Poets Society, scattered snickering, what the people in the background are doing. And this is from not a play, but a movie, which is written a little bit differently. So here the dialogue is here, the stage direction is here. The Joker tugs Gamble's cheek with the blade. He looks up at ashen faces of the remaining bodyguards and smiles, and then he flicks his wrist and the guard flinches as Gamble goes down and the Joker turns to them. If you did not read the directions, the stage directions, you would miss all of that action, right? So it's really quite important. Technical elements, props, and set decor. This is from a prop room. Know these definitions. If something is touched or used, it is a prop. If it's not touched, it's part of set decoration. So sometimes in the stage directions, when we look at the mother's house that I was just talking about, a lot of her set decorations are described. Many other times they're not, because they're not as important. The props will be described more in the stage directions because props are touched or used by the actors. So in the play Doubt, we have the prop of a teacup at one point. They're having tea and coffee and sugar. So the sugar bowl is described as it's being used and touched. When dressing the set and picking props, the director might think about the symbolism, and so would the playwright. The sugar I just described, for example, is described in the text. So symbolism is a little bit more difficult sometimes to determine in a play than it is in a short story. But props are something that you can look for, stage directions sometimes, costuming sometimes, and then other things that the characters talk about. And again, for the longer plays, I'll be explaining a few of those symbols and kind of pulling them out of there for you before you go into reading. Costumes are the clothing choices, the accessories, the makeup and hair, all of that goes into a costume. Costuming can demonstrate a character's job or position, so a lawyer in a suit, a drifter wearing worn out shoes and baggy pants. They can also establish personality traits. For example, a color might distinguish an enemy from a friend. And they can show time period. Sometimes just to show you what time period we're in. The play Doubt takes place in the 1960s. The play Pygmalion was written in 1901, but takes place a little bit before that, so the late 1890s. The time period will be extremely important in both of those plays. So how the people dress and how they're acting, their costume choices rather, are kind of important. They can also show changes to a character over time. So a young college student to a 30-something-year-old man with a family. These are from the play Othello. This is a sketch from one version of Othello that the person putting on the production had the costumers kind of sketch out. If you've never read it, Othello is a general. He is from Africa. He is in Venice. He's a Moor. So some of the plays emphasize the fact that he's a general. Here he's got a shield on, right? And then the typical Shakespearean kind of apparel. Here, he is dressed in this play much like the other people in the play. That famous ruffled collar, baggier pantaloons, and he's got the sword at his side because he is in the military, right? And the richness of his clothes sort of depicts his station in life. He's got a cape on as well. So I'm not sure if these are the original sketch and then the final version, but it certainly is similar. It's just sort of particular to that time period. In this version of Othello, they really wanted to emphasize the fact, and also I don't like this picture as much because just get an African-American actor. Why do you have a white guy in black makeup? I don't understand that. But what you can see here is the feathers, the long train here. He is supposed to look more regal. in this version. And so a couple different clothing choices, perhaps also to emphasize that he is not from Venice. The woman that he's with is dressed almost in like ancient Grecian attire almost. It's not quite a toga, but it kind of looks that way. That's his wife, the fair Desdemona. And then we have this version, which is much more military. Again, they're all taking place in the same time period, but you can see here with the gold embroidery and the gold buttons, right? And the waistcoat and then the vest and the red trim. It's interesting that that's what the director sort of wanted to emphasize. So in the first version, I showed you just the richness of his position and how high he's climbed up the ladder. The second one, the fact that he's from a different country, that he's sort of a little bit alien or other to the other people in the play, and also that he's very regal stature. And the third one, just that more focusing on the fact that he's in the military, right? 3 really different renditions, and the costume choices do symbolize what the directors wanted to emphasize. So how does drama present a different experience? Well, as I've said, many elements are similar to short fiction, but it uses those visual and technical elements to help tell the story for the audience. So the reason that I really didn't get into some of the similar elements, because you already know those, right? I'm just trying to show you some of the differences. It can sometimes be difficult to read drama because you're reading a stage directions instead of descriptions. You're reading dialogue instead of, narration. And instead of the actual location or setting, you just have those stage directions or the description at the beginning of the act. Symbols are also difficult to detect. And so that is something that people struggle with. And again, when we get to those plays, we'll talk about those symbols a little bit more. However, I also think it can be easier to read because the story, the action is often linear. Sometimes you'll have flashbacks and flash forwards, not in the plays we're going to read, but in some plays. Each character's name appears when he or she is going to speak, and items like setting are clearly spelled out. So you know right away which objects are important, right? You don't have to kind of hunt around in terms of the setting. It tells you right there. Here's who's in this play, here's who they are, here's their relationship to each other. So I hope that you enjoy reading these plays, and we're going to talk briefly about the OneAct Plays, for which there are also videos on YouTube that you can watch. So the first play I want to talk about is Sure Thing. These are, it's a picture from a stage version, not one of the ones we're watching. This was originally from a group of plays called All in the Timing. And the theme of those plays really was about timing. That's one of the themes in this play as well. So there's 2 people, Betty and Bill, and they're meeting for the first time. A bell rings, interrupting them each time they say something wrong. It's kind of like an instant do-over. Now, I'd like to explain this because if you just read the play, it can be kind of confusing. You really have to watch it in action. This is kind of an experimental play as well. So it's not really meant to be actually happening, if that makes any sense. Think of this almost like 2 people are kind of on a first date, almost, or they're meeting for the first time. But the message here in this play is how we judge each other. Where you went to school, what books you read, where you were born, what music you like, what movies you like, what your beliefs are, all of those kind of things. People judge each other for those things all the time. And this play kind of shows how if you're very judgmental like that, you have to say all the right things in order for it to work out in the end. But here's really what I want you to watch for. I'm giving you 2 versions of the play. One that's on a stage, it's a college production, and another one that was also a college production, but they filmed it. So the first one is on stage, the second is more cinematic. And I'd like you to kind of think and then talk in your responses about the differences between those 2 plays. those two versions of the same play. Honestly, it's almost like watching two different plays in a way, because they're so different. The timing is different, how they say the lines, the casting choices. There's a lot of differences between those plays. So consider some of those things. How the actors' choices change the characterization. What are the differences in setting? What are the differences in dialogue? This is a comedy, meaning that everything works out in the end. The one version is done in a much more fast-paced, humorous way. The other version really is not done that way at all. So it works out in the end, but it's not as funny or snappy dialogue. That doesn't mean that it's worse or better. It just means that it's different, and it's sort of interesting to me how people kind of took this play and did such different things with it. You can see here from the two pictures I've got, neither of which are from the play versions you'll be watching, the two versions, how minimal the sets are. So it's just two people in normal clothes at a coffee table with a book. It's the only prop, and possibly something to drink, it looks like. So, not a lot of set decor, rather. It really has a lot more to do with the dialogue than anything else. The other one-act play you're going to read is called Before Breakfast. Now, this is in our tragedy unit for drama. This is a picture from a stage version of this play. The one-act play is structured in a monologue form. So it's one woman talking. She's sort of possibly a soliloquy, I guess you could say, because there's nobody else on stage, but she's supposed to be talking to her husband who's off stage. So this is the half hour before breakfast on the last day of Alfred Rowland's life. Alfred does not appear on stage, but she does. So Mrs. Rowland speaks to her husband, who is never seen, and we learn about their situation and their marriage as she yells to him from the kitchen. I want you to read this carefully because the ending can be confusing. So take a look at what she's saying about her husband and what's going on between them and what situation they're in. There's a little bit there with setting too in the stage directions of what this kitchen exactly is supposed to look like that she's in. So all we have are Mrs. Rowland's words and the descriptions of the set, the props, and the sound effects. So if you only read the dialogue, you're going to miss some of those nuances. Those are some things I would like you to take a look at. Pay close attention to the stage directions in italics. How does the author use them to convey setting, mood, and conflict? What's the tone in this short play? The tone, again, is the emotional attitude that the speaker has toward the audience. So what tone is she taking? The climax comes at the very end, so there's no resolution. And I want you to think about the ending and whether or not it was satisfying. And finally, the difference in the two versions that I'm going to provide for you, do they affect the meaning of the play? To me, I'm giving you two versions. To be honest, the one version I found a little bit difficult. She does have an accent, so some of her lines aren't maybe as clear, but that's not really what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is, do people play the parts differently? Does it affect the meaning? For this play, it's a little bit longer than Sure Thing. Sure Thing's about 7 minutes. This one's about 20. So you don't have to fully watch both versions if you read it, which you should be reading it. So I'd like you to read the play. You can watch part of one version, part of another version. You don't have to watch both fully through. And then the final offstage incident. Is it more clear in the stage versions what happens at the end, or is it more clear in the text? So that is our now we come to our end. I really look forward to reading your interpretations, especially of these short plays. They're very interesting plays, and there's a lot, especially in Before Breakfast, there's just a lot there in a short period of time. So it'll be interesting, I think, to look at the one acts. And in my next couple of lectures, I'm going to be talking about the longer plays that we'll be looking at soon. That's it. Thanks, guys.